Well, first of all, I have to thank you. I appreciate you staying here at the end of this long day. Okay, I present myself. I am Marco Sogliani. I've been a co-founder and I am still a member of the Italian Software Qualification Board. And being 77-year-old, I believe I am the dean of this audience. But certainly what is more important than my age maybe are the 50 more, almost 60 next years experience in ICT. Okay? Most of the time spent in direct contact with the software quality. As a matter of fact, I've been lucky enough to be a member and later on a responsible leader of groups of specialists dedicated to the study and evaluation, dissemination of technologies, methodologies and tools, mainly in software development and in service provision. And in that situation, I had the opportunity to be a testimonial and sometime being directly involved in some of the main events or sometimes cornerstones of the long life, long path of software quality. From the beginning, from the first steps, up to the difficult and contrasting expansion in the 1780 years of last century, and up to the present, I consider it maturity of software quality. So, therefore, I don't know if my presentation, will really interest you because it will not be a technical one. It will be just a fast excursus of some of my experiences in direct contact with software quality. But I hope that it will stimulate you, to follow the same approach that I think always characterized my activities. To be curious and to be open, to study, the leading edge novelties in ICT, and not only to take advantages of them and activities, but of course improving the effectiveness and efficiency of your activity or the activity of your customer or your counterparts, but also for providing the satisfaction in what you do, as I still enjoy today. Yeah, sure. So I started working in '59, and after, really, nobody of you were born at that time, yes. And after graduating from the high school, I joined a bank in Milan, a big bank, and I was inserted in the study department. And in that position, I could follow from the outside, in this case, not with a direct involvement, the migration from the bank migration from the first generation computer. Third generation was just use punched cards, and where programming was done, by inserting cables, black cables in a big external boards with holes, to a second generation computer, the computer with tapes. Maybe you have seen that at historical spy movies. But already with the first programming languages, a basic programming languages, which was called autocoder, and has been the father of the later on assembler, And also at the university I was following at night, I studied a new science which was coming to life at that time, operational research, and I tried to apply the concept, some of the concepts of operational research in the bank. And I made two studies I published within the bank. First, for allowing the reduction of the waiting time, queuing and waiting time at the counter desks. And the second one for optimizing the number and the quantity of money, banknotes and coins at the cashiers. Yeah? But he remained only a theoretical one because the capacity of the computers at the time was not sufficient for allowing the necessary simulation that was necessary for having a practical application of that one. In any case, my experience in the bank had a good result. The decision to leave the bank and to start, that my future would have been in data processing, of which I foresaw not only the big expansion, which happened, but also the interest, the professional interest in what I could have been my later activity. So I left the bank and I joined IBM, where I stayed for 31 years, making all the career path up to the third managerial level. And as soon as I joined IBM, after 1 month, I was sent immediately to New York for 9 months, where I had the opportunity to follow the courses of the new computers, that 360, that IBM was announcing that year. 360, I don't know if someone of you know it, was a completely new third-generation computer based on a completely innovative technology, solid logic technologies, that replaced the former valves of the previous computers. But what was important, it had a completely innovative hardware, software architecture. The hardware architecture of the 360, which is still the same now, basically, applied to all the present computers, were based on the separation of CPU, memory, buses, channels, peripherals, and the software architecture based on the newly introduced operating system. And the structure of this operating system is still very similar to the present structure of all the operating system at present day. Disappear? Sorry?
I've asked specialists to come and help us with your presentation. If it's possible, if you can continue.
Good. Yes. Okay. Well, so when I came back from New York, I had already a preparation of the new computer, and I joined the first group of specialists in Milan, an Italian group of specialists providing specialized support to the customers. And my first activity has been to install the first 360 computers in Italy, which was in the IBM test center. IBM at that time provided a test capabilities for the customer before their own installations, okay? So the customer came to this location with their programs, and they have to compile, debug, and then to test it. And so you had the first witnesses with the first very basically and very simple testing techniques. Sorry? This one? Ah, come on.
That's why.
That's why, sorry.
I think so.
Sorry. So my finger is too large.
Bigger, yeah.
Okay.
You see? Yeah, again.
Yeah. Again?
Let me with my finger. At first.
No, it doesn't work. It's not a problem of fingers. It's not a problem of fingers. Well, in any case, after some months of these experiences, it created to me the basis for testing. Okay, Yeah. So, the slides are there.
Oh, look. Now, then hide it.
So now they are open.
Yes, and after, give me a second, I will open.
Okay. My next job was to go to the customer. I was nominated project leader of the big installation, the first big installation in Italy, in a customer that was a large electric power supplier. And we installed the 360 Model 50. It was a big computer, yeah, 64K of memory, 64,000 bytes of memory, okay? Having, okay, the tapes, okay, and the completely new peripherals, disk drives. And the disk drives, okay, with removable pack of disk with a capacity of 7 megabytes. It works now? Okay. So, pushing.
You see? Just like like hide it in the program.
I sent them to you in any case. Okay. Okay, I don't say. I don't say
It
anything.
works.
Works?
Yes, press program.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Okay. So, a computer that required a machine room of 60 meters long and required also water cooling for the big heat that was dissipating on the side. And I had to follow a project in which about more than 60 programmers were dedicated, first of all, to the conversion from the second generation computer to a third generation computer. And we have to face the usual problems, but increased by the novelty of the operating system, but mainly, okay, to the maturity of the languages that IBM convinced the customer to adopt. These languages was called PL1. Nobody of you, of course, knows it. But at that time, okay, PL1 was pushed by IBM in order to replace, okay, the common languages, COBOL for commercial application and Fortran for scientific applications. And it was a very complex and powerful but complicated languages. And so, as usual, I had to teach the programmers how to do it. And we start utilizing the first compiler. And of course, the compiler was full of bugs. We have been the first customer in Europe to utilize this one. And so I had to travel, okay, to the English laboratories where the compiler was developed every fortnight and coming back with the new versions and of course accumulating delays in the project. So after 9 months at the end, okay, we succeeded in compiling without mistakes and without errors. Okay, the first application, which was a billing application, and we tested it in the final way. The final result was the same as the previous second generation applications. And so the big day, okay, we invited the CIO of the customers, who was quite nervous, and of my line management in a sort of demonstration, a sort of user acceptance, okay, test, and in which we demonstrated the big advantages of the cost of the new computers that should have reduced the elapse of time of the second generation. It was about 2 hours, okay, to something very outstanding. And since the beginning, I started worrying because I saw the tapes moving very slowly and the printer printing one line every 2 seconds, and then the heads of the disk moving like crazy, like mad. And after 2.5 hours, the CIO left completely unsatisfied, and the duration was more than 10 hours. Okay? The lesson learned about that was, first of all, that of course, according to the testing principle, no matter how many tests you do, you will never be sure that the final result will be acceptable. Okay? And the second result was the cause of this. And the cause of this was that we should have taken advantages of making a test on the real production environment. It was different from the testing environment. And the production environment, we had conflicting. And of course, the conflicting required a smart allocation of the resources on the different channels, on the different peripherals, in order to avoid the contrasting. And second reason was also the fact that in programming, you should take care about the suggestions to avoid, for instance, in that case, to do the conversion, the variable conversion of the programs within the inner loops, that created, the length. So as a final result, about that, I wrote the first of my books. It was on the efficient programming in PL1. It was distributed to all the Italian customers utilizing PL1. But despite of this, PL1 did not take off. It was withdrawn after at the end of the 70s. So after that, instead of punishing me, my boss sent me to Geneva. In Geneva, there was let us call the IBM University. And there was a sort of master class, a 5-month master classes on all the ICT problems, ICT techniques and so on. And one of these courses was held by a young guy, a young English guy called James Martin. Do you know James Martin? Yeah. And James Martin made a course on software development, in which he considered software development a process. And he said, he taught to us that this kind of process needed to individuate different phases, starting from requirements up to the testing. That for each phase, you need to be documented, and not only documented, but verified, with some sort of reviews, and approved. And so he created the basis, for the first software life cycle, the waterfall, and as being the content of this famous book, Information Engineer. And so this waterfall model was then followed not only within IBM, for our standard life cycle, but most of the customers in the 70s and the beginning of the 80s took advantage of waterfall, which then on brought to them quite a lot of advantages, but then it deteriorated in bureaucracy. Of course, as you know, a lot of documentation not necessary. So after Geneva, I became manager. I became manager of the specialized group, this Italian group, and providing specialized support both from the technical point of view to the customers in order to take advantage in the most efficient way of their own computers, but also some marketing, some sales support, supporting our sales forces to sell the computers with demonstration approach, but mainly that period of time, mainly, for doing benchmarking. Benchmarking is an activity that was quite spread at that time because the customer wanted the time to, before spending the money in the order, to compare not only the price, but compare also the capacity of the computers, and evaluating this capacity with some index, throughput, quantity of work in a unit of time. And in order to do that, they provided to the supplier, including IBM, okay, a job stream of applications that should have been compiled, executed. And therefore, with my group, we have specialized in debugging, okay, optimizing the code in order to avoid this kind of problems that I mentioned you before, and to configure in the best way the allocation of resources in the execution environment. And that was quite complex because at the time you have to take into consideration many things. Okay? Multi-programming was just very primitive, so you have to consider the CPU utilization of each program in order to optimize the concurrent operations. Next job, to Paris. 3 years assignment in which I became the manager responsible for all the internal installations of IBM in EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And in that computing centers, they were providing not only marketing demonstration like demonstration and benchmarking and so on, but also service. Okay? IBM at that time for the customer which could not have the interest or the money for having their own computer, they asked IBM to develop and then to provide services for their own application, a sort of primeval SAS at the present day. And I have the responsibility, functional, not hierarchical, of more than 2,000 people and about more than 150 installations all over my region. And with budget constraints, my manager, okay, obliged me to reduce the overall cost, which is quite very expensive. So the big challenge was to ensure the coexistence in this unified environment of different requirements. The flexibility for marketing activities, stability and business continuity for the service provision. And therefore with my group of people, we designed and developed and distributed the first guidelines. First, for instance, identifying, first of all, the different roles, okay, and responsibilities of the different people. And for instance, identifying the necessity of having, we call it the system administrator or system coordinators that should ensure, okay, the stability and the flexibility at the same time of their environment by evaluating every change and by approving every promotion of a new application into production. Okay? And therefore, okay, with these guidelines, we created the first set of what later on, 30 or 40 years later, ITIL and ISO 20000 considered as the sub-processes of service provision: configuration management, change management, release, and availability management. And curiously enough, okay, for the first objective that my management gave me to reduce the cost, the only approach that I identified was to take advantage of the newly availability at the network level of remote job entry. And so therefore, to reduce the number of installations by making them larger and to downsizing the smaller installation as just a passive remote. And I've done this, and I had to reach an objective for this year of reducing the number to 225 locations from the 150, to which a certain percentage of my salary was linked. And I was missing, okay, to achieve this. But luckily enough for myself, okay, we had to close Saigon and Phnom Penh after the Vietnamese War. And therefore, I think I've been the first one in the Western world to enjoy about the end of the Vietnamese War. When I finished the I was sent to Rome, where I became once more the director of a very large group of specialized people, once more providing second-level support and so on, but in addition, having the responsibility for some risky projects. And therefore, one of the riskiest projects at the time was IMPS, the National Security Italian one. It was a big installation, 4 big computers, more than 100 peripherals, distributed systems, okay? Having the necessity to face all the different, all the complexity of that kind of distributed systems. And one important fact at that time was the necessity of synchronizing the release of the new applications in order to ensure that all of them will be synchronized in the same way. And so we introduced the versioning. It was strange for you, but versioning was introduced at that time, okay? And to ensure that the distribution would be efficient. And in order to do the distribution, IBM had to develop in their own lab in Rome, okay, a particular distributed network systems that was the basis now for the present IBM offering in that area. Next job, I was nominated director of an international center. International center located close to Milan in the IBM factory where the intermediate systems, the systems 36, 38, and the S400 were manufactured. And in that position, we had to providing the third level support to all the work. I have people coming from all the different countries in the work, and making also demos. And we demonstrated at that time, okay, the first approach of IBM of a free-tier architecture. So we made a free-tier architecture launch, okay, for utilizing synchronized operating system at the 3 levels. We had MVS at the large, OS400 in the intermediate, and OS2 that was the tentative of IBM to contrast Microsoft, okay, also without success. Okay? And we experimented the first middleware that later on became the basis for IBM WebSphere. And once more, coming back to Italy, I was appointed director of all the big projects in IBM. So I had with my group about 25 project managers, very senior ones. And in that situation, we experimented for the first time the approach of utilizing project scheduling, project control. I had a meeting every week, okay, on the status of the projects. We utilize also the IBM project control, which was then outclassed by Microsoft project. And one of the biggest and risky projects was from in Florence, a customer for the highways, which was a win back from a competition, and in which we installed the first DB2, first relational application in Italy. And in DB2, as usual, we had the first problem instability of the product itself. And we required, of course, to verify the design. And we applied the first database design techniques. And due to the fact that we had to integrate multiple files coming from different former applications, we discovered not only the necessity of having a DB manager, okay, but also a data manager, which was responsible for the company data dictionary, and we should solve the problem of incompatibility of definitions. My last job in IBM was the most productive one, because I had the possibility to have a very large group of specialists, about more than 75, and in which I had the opportunity to have the critical mass for specializing them in all the subsectors of application development and service provision. And therefore, I have the possibility to make investment in new technologies and leading edge novelties and so on. And I had the full responsibility for providing not only support to the internal IBM locations, but also marketing responsibility for selling all the methodologies and products in these two environments, and also to follow all the customer projects for application of these tools and methodologies. And in that situation, for instance, we had the possibility to test in 1988 CMM. CMM was developed by a colleague of mine, Wat Humphreys, which worked in the Ministry of Defense of the US. And he introduced at that time this new assessment methodologies and asked for his colleague, me included, to verify the feasibility of this new approach. And I tried to do it within one of my development environment, and I obtained only a level 2 of maturity, whereas I was thinking to be smarter than that. Another one was, another colleague of mine was Albert Albrecht, who was the father of function points. And we adopted function point at that time, obliging all the IBM supplier for software development to apply these new estimating methodologies. And then one of the big announcements of IBM at the time was the IBM repository. IBM repository was a tentative of IBM to introduce a centralized database in which all the intermediate artifacts of software development and the software provision services, should be archived, and obliging all the tools to interface this kind of database. But the complexity of the things after 1 year was such that we have to drop completely this approach. Also, another fail was the tentative, to utilize the first capture and replay tools that IBM was providing at that time. And the reason for the unsuccess was the difficulty of maintaining all the scripts, due to the change in in the applications. We introduced the inspection peer-to-peer reviews and other failed because the reaction of our colleagues was quite negative. They considered it a sort of criticism in front of their work. But what has been a success was my involvement in object-oriented. I had one very smart guy in my group that 2 or 3 years before the announcement of object-oriented, in a period when very few people knew what object-oriented was, convinced me to invest his time, and a colleague of his, 2 people, in this new paradigm. And so when IBM decided to announce and to buy this concept, I had already a group that was enlarged later on, and I created in Italy the Object-Oriented Competence Center within my organization, which supported the expansion and the announcement of that approach within the customer. Okay? But the most important fact for my future career when I left IBM was the first certification ISO 9000 that I obtained with my people, for one of the development environment of IBM. And that was the possibility for doing an extension of my working activities in a consultancy field. And I became an auditor for ISO, and I supported many customers in obtaining the certifications, not only in ISO 9000, but also later on in the extension for all the other norms, including 27,000, 20,000, and so on, and an additional models which were considered compulsory in Italy. For instance, you had to have a system for ensuring that you have created anti-corruption systems. Each one of these models required, from the certification point of view, their own systems with the independent procedure, independent schemes, and so on. And this would have created in the customers quite a lot of parallel systems contrasted with each other. That is the reason why I took the position to contrast this approach, which was asked and required by the certification bodies. And I tried to convince them, of the utility and advantages of a unique system, which we call it integrated quality systems, in which, all the new models that the company could have adopted should be inserted in an integrated way. And that is something that at present is quite common in my country. I also joined the quality organization. I became president of the Italian Software Quality Organization. I became vice president of the European Software Quality Organization. And in that position, the main activities were just to organize conferences like these ones, and we did it at European level and then also at worldwide level with the cooperation of the Japan and then of the American ones. And that was, I finish. And that was the experiences in the conferences that had an history, because I started working in the conferences in the beginning of the 70 years, when IBM convinced the customers to have their own association for doing an exchange of experiences in conferences, what's called guide. Okay? Later on, the conferences were organized, okay, by the IT supplier of products, supplier of services, and so on. In the 90s, that was organized by the Software Quality Organization I mentioned before, and in the beginning of the 2000, STQB, okay, was taking the testimonial for the conferences. And in Italy, we are running this year the 11th conferences on software quality and testing, on software testing, sorry. And our approach has been to have a free participation for all the people, okay? And trying to compensate the cost with the sponsorship. And we had a success because in our conferences every year, we have more than 400, 450 participants. And we are, okay, also in balance with the cost and revenue. Okay. So I thank you very much for your attention. And this is Davide. I am open. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the speech. You have told us about lots of different projects you are working on. What is the oldest project is still maintaining, still functioning?
What kind of project?
Are there any projects that are still going on and they're still working?
Sure. Well, for instance, the one that I mentioned, the highway one. Yeah, the highway one is a project that the main application was just the control of the automatic gates at the highways. Okay, and that kind of project is still there, still IBM. Okay, and it's still working after 30 years, and so on.
So for how long it is working now?
Well, it is working since 1988, 30 years. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Yeah.
Molto grazie, signora Sogliani.
Grazie.
I have a questions regarding, in the last slide that you have presented, listed all what you have done actually for software quality, like attention, awareness, and then also informations. So what is going to be, in 2020? So what is it?
I hope to, first of all, to be still alive. And second, okay, what I hope is that my present main activities, which is ISTQB, okay, will continue, okay, to provide this sort of awareness to the customer management about the relevance and the importance of software quality and testing. And as a matter of fact, the statistics that we are collecting and we are publishing from the surveys that we are running, okay, every year are showing, okay, the positive results and so on. Because the management attitude, I see the CIO, but also the CEO, okay, has changed quite a lot. And the demonstration is the fact of the extension of the investment, the percentage of testing costs over the total, okay, ICT budget, okay, now is almost 30%, and therefore so, okay, in the next years to reach also the 45%, which is quite amazing from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I mean, I did not refer actually you as person, what you're going to do is more, from the timeline and from the roadmap and then as mature level of the software testing quality. Yes, but thank you.
Okay.
And Maybe I have a small question, based on your experience last 50 years, what is important? What is important, in your work? I can list, different things, that, the people are telling, process is important, tooling, people, environment, what is important? Just
Well, I say
one word.
a mixture of all the elements that you mentioned, of course. Okay, you can do anything without people. You can do anything without tools. You can do anything without environment machines and so on. So I think the smartest approach is try to take into consideration all the different requirements for each one of those elements, okay, in order to create, okay, an integrated system which took into consideration all the requirements and all the cost, all the attitude of all these kind of elements, which is not easy, but certainly will be the demonstration of a possible success.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We don't have time for questions. Maybe one last it will be.
Thank you for your speech. Can you have you tell any must-have metrics or KPI system for success QA team?
Sorry, say it again.
Can